Welcome to the Center for Spiritual Awareness, the church that love is building in West Sacramento. I'm so glad to have you all here today. I always start every single service with just a little word about who we are, because I notice some of you are not part of our congregation yet. And so let me just tell you where you've landed. We are a center with many, many, many beliefs, and they all boil down to these four. The four beliefs are these. Number one is that God is all there is. Whether you call that entity pure love, or infinite intelligence, or divine wisdom, or Allah, or Elohim, or the sacred grandmother tree, whatever you call that essence, that's all there is. There's no external evil, there's no external devil. Now you and I know there's plenty of evil and plenty of devilishness in this world. All we have to do is turn on the television. Sometimes we just have to get a call from our sister-in-law, whatever it is that happens, we know it's there. But we believe it starts and stops right here. The second belief that we have is that all thought is creative and influential. And as a result of that, we're thoughtful what kind of thinking that we do around here. We don't beat ourselves up. If we have a funky thought, if we have a mean-spirited thought, we simply put in a new thought and move on. We're not a shaming tribe. We're not a blaming tribe. We just put in a new thought and we move on. The third belief that we have is that everything in our experience is either a call for love or an expression of love.
No exceptions.
No exceptions, none. And that gets a little tougher because sometimes calls for love can come clumsy. Sometimes they can come ugly, but if we can return love to them, no matter how they come to us, even out of our own mouth, if we can return love to them, we can transform that situation and begin to transform the Central Valley. The last belief that we have that we hold on to with all of our heart, all of our mind, and all of our soul is that you are whole, perfect, and complete just as you are right this second. There may be some behaviors you want to let go of, some patterns you want to interrupt, some thoughts you want to not have anymore, but at your essence, you are whole, perfect, and complete, just like you are right now. Nothing more to add. All right, so that's where you've landed. So everybody feels safe, nobody's running out the door, and that's always a good thing. So we always start with prayer here, but we start with one thing before that, and that is we welcome anybody into the congregation who couldn't be here. We invite their spirit in here. So we're going to do that again tonight. If there's somebody in your heart today who would love to have been here tonight, but they couldn't because they were traveling, or it was just the wrong night, or they're not feeling well, or perhaps it's the anniversary of crossing over, that's why they're in your heart, or perhaps you're having a fuss with somebody and they didn't want to come because you're having a fuss. Don't underestimate the healing properties of this sanctuary. Whatever the reason they're in your heart this day, I invite you to speak their name aloud as I light this memory candle. Let's bring them into the church tonight. All right. Well, we're going to get started in 1 second. What I've asked these fabulous clergy to do is to come prepared to answer 2 questions in 5 minutes. Now, I want to tell you, for clergy, that's a challenge. But I have a handy little sign here that's giving them a 1 minute little notice and then a bye-bye notice. So I've asked them to answer 2 questions, and the 2 questions are these. What aspect of your belief system do you think is the most challenging for your believers to accept, and why? And the second question is, what do you wish those not in your faith could better understand about you? So Christy, let's have our musical invocation, and then we'll start with Rabbi Mona.
So this song is the St. Francis. This song is the St. Francis prayer. Okay, we're working on it. We know all is well. So just rest. Just rest. Just let this song fall down into your heart. Can you hear me? Okay.
stay up here because when I wander around, I talk longer. So I'm going to try to keep it under control. So the first question that we were asked to respond to was, what aspect of your belief system do you think is the most challenging for your believers to accept, and why? The phrasing of the question is even interesting because that gets to the challenge that we have in Judaism, which is the idea of being a believer. Judaism is much more about what you do more than what you believe. And so I'd say, hands down, the biggest challenge for people who are Jewish is the belief in God. I'm always amused when there are surveys done about different religions and what they believe and what they do, and it always has, the different Christian faiths and different religions, and then Judaism and then atheism, and it doesn't acknowledge that there's actually a huge overlap between atheism and Judaism. Huge overlap. And so that even though I'm a rabbi at a synagogue, I would say the majority of my congregants are either atheists or agnostic. And part of the reason for this, there's a lot of reasons, but I think part of the reason for this is in America, so much of our language is influenced by Christianity. And so when we talk about God, we're using English more than we use our words in Hebrew or even in Yiddish. And so the God language feels foreign, or it feels uncomfortable, or it doesn't feel quite like the right fit, because it often even the word God, for many Americans, the image is the old man in the cloud, and it's a very human, male, physical image of God. And that actually is not really inherent or natural in Judaism. While we do have some male imagery for God, where at the high holidays we call God Avinu or Malkeinu, our Father and our King, we also call God our rock, or the source of life, or Hamakom, the place where we are. We have a vast array of imagery in Hebrew and in the Psalms and in our prayers that doesn't translate quite right into the English. And so for a lot of American Jews, just talking about God, using the word God, feels very off-putting and very hierarchical in a way that doesn't feel comfortable. So last Yom Kippur, I gave a sermon called The Theology of Star Wars. And I think it was the most popular sermon in my 18 years that I've ever given. And being able to frame the concept of God as the force, or as we would say in Hebrew, the source, or hamakom, hamakor, really changed the way a lot of our congregants could feel or relate or connect with the idea of the holy. And actually, usually, in many of my sermons, I won't refer to God, I'll refer to that which is holy. Because people can connect with the concept of holiness, or the concept of connectivity, of what connects us, or what one of our theologians, Martin Buber, talked about, like the I-thou experience, that experience of being in relationship with something or someone else. That is a more comfortable concept for many Jews. So as a result, we tend not to talk about God a lot, even in a synagogue setting. And so I'd say that is probably, as a rabbi, my biggest challenge. It's really unfortunate. The second question, how am I doing on time? Am I halfway there?
Yeah, you're more than that.
Okay, so I'll talk fast. So the second question is, what do you wish those not in your faith could better understand about you? I think one of the hardest things for non-Jews to understand about Judaism is that religion is just a part of who we are. It is not the totality of who we are. That the Jewish identity is a very layered concept, and that there are different ways to be Jewish or to identify as a Jew, and that religion is part of it, but it's not the totality. We're first and foremost an ethnic group, a tribe is a better way of describing how we view ourselves. It's a tribe that does have a creed, that has a faith, that has a shared language, that has a shared history, and yet you'll see Jews in a variety of cultures, from a variety of countries and a variety ways of practicing and expressing their Judaism, one of which is religious. And even the religious aspect, there are many ways within Judaism that one might express their religious identity. Am I there? I don't want to.
3 minutes.
Oh, I have 3 minutes. You
3
put.
seconds. 3 seconds.
Oh, 3 seconds.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be to you. My name is Kamran Islam. I come from the Tarbiyya Institute, and today I come to you as a student of Islam, as well as a teacher, but primarily I come to you just as a representative of my faith and of those who adhere to this faith, this world religion known as Islam. And certainly the question, as the Rabbi mentioned, was a difficult one to consider, so I took the easy way out and I just asked a bunch of people. And I did come up with a few interesting responses, but the one that I think was most consistent and was most understandable in terms of what is the most difficult aspect of the faith for congregants to understand and to accept and to work with, I will add. Hey, Arvi. I just know somebody in the audience. To work with is probably the 5 daily prayers. And in order to understand the dynamics around that, I'll share with you a story, the story of the 5 daily prayers. Actually, let me share with you this first. Imagine that it is 5:45 in the morning, and the rest of your time zone is asleep, and you have to wake up and put water on your hands and on your face, and get fully awoken, and then pray. And now you have hours before you have to do anything else. So you're like, man, I wish I had just slept. And then imagine a few hours later, after the sun has reached its highest point, just in the early afternoon, you need to pray again. And then after that, in the late afternoon, you'll need to pray again. And in the sunset time, you'll need to pray for a 4th time. And finally, before you go to bed, there's another ritual prayer. Now, you can understand perhaps why some people would find that difficult. It's not necessarily the easiest thing to do, to schedule your entire day around this act of worship, but practicing Muslims do pray 5 times a day. And even as a young person growing up in a busy country like the United States, where you're always busy with homework, and then you're busy with college applications, and then you're busy with projects and all that, it could be difficult, it could be challenging. The story of prayer itself is a very emotional one, though. It comes to us a few years after Prophet Muhammad was appointed as prophet by God, and the society around him many of them had rejected his faith and his way of life for the changes that it called people to. And so they decided to boycott him and his family and his tribe, to the point where many of them were starving. Now, in that year-long boycott, he lost his closest uncle, the one who had raised him, and he also lost his wife. And it was a really challenging time for him. And near the end of that time, as the Islamic tradition goes, Muhammad was called to God. Now the scholars debate whether it was in physical form or in spiritual form, but regardless, he was called to God. And he had this face-to-face meeting with God, which was the only prophet that had ever had such a privilege before, was Prophet Moses. And so, in this conversation, God tells Muhammad, I have a gift for you and for your people, for when you struggle in such times and when you need to connect with God, and it is this daily prayer. And so the story goes that initially God offered 50 daily prayers. And so Muhammad, when he receives this gift and he's so excited, he's on his way back down from the heavens, and he encounters who else but Prophet Moses. And they discuss, and Moses tells him, you know what, your people are going to struggle with this, believe me. And so he goes back and he has this conversation with God, and so the number is decreased. And he goes back and Moses catches him again and says, hey, hold on, your people are going to struggle with that too. Eventually this back and forth goes on until he decides, they come to the number 5. And so 5 daily prayers, the way that we understand them, there are 5 daily opportunities to connect with God, to connect with Him in our mind, in our body, and in our soul. And if you've ever seen the Islamic faith practicing prayer, you know that it's also a very physical activity and a group activity, things like that. And for the second question, because I have like 30 seconds, remind me of the second question, please.
What would you like others not of
Yes.
your faith to know?
What would I like others not of my faith to know about me, and to know about adherents of my faith? I think that there are many things, obviously, unfortunately, but one that I will definitely emphasize is our love for having a good time and laughing at ourselves and at jokes. I think people sometimes, for some strange reason, mistake Muslims to be very serious people, as if there's, a different kind of human being. But we really do love to laugh. We also love to eat, as you can probably tell from me. And the truth is that this also comes to us from our Prophet, who was himself a bit of a jokester. And he said once that you do not bring leniency to something without beautifying it, and you do not bring hardship to something without making it harsh and unpalatable. And I'll end it there.
Good evening. So I'm Lyle Larson, and I'm from the Davis Shambhala Meditation Center. So we hold both the Shambhala and the Buddhist traditions. So I'd like to start with the second question, primarily in Buddhism. And that is the notion that the Buddha is somehow different than ourselves, that a Buddha is an awake one. So we have the notion, very similar to what Reverend Georgia was saying, the view that there's nothing wrong with any of us, inherently, fundamentally. And also, the second question, that what is the most challenging, is we don't really try to work with things as a belief system. There are many that argue that Buddhism is not a religion because it's not theistic based. It's more experience and philosophy. So many would argue that it's a philosophy. To me, it doesn't matter. So the most challenging thing, let me give just a little bit of a background. So if we have the notion that we are mindfulness, that's what I did. Mindfulness, okay. So instead of a belief system, what we say in Buddhism is, it is said that this is the way it is. It's called a view. And it's up to each of us, through a set of skillful practices, contemplations, meditation, to understand intuitively, not conceptually, intuitively, directly, presently, we can know the world and know it to be complete and whole and not deficient. There's nothing else that we need. And the hardest thing to understand is when we look around our world, we see such incredible harm that is going on. Wars, cruelty, suffering. The hardest thing for us to understand is that every one of us has the same potential to be as cruel as the most cruel person on the earth, and the same potential to be an awake person, to be a Buddha. So the Buddhists have a slogan, and very much in the spirit of Reverend Georgia. All Dharma agrees at one point. And what that means to me is Dharma, or teachings, or truth. When there's complete, direct, non-conceptual understanding, when our hearts are completely open, there's no disagreement. And the Buddhist would say, when you complete the path, you then understand that it was completely unnecessary in the first place. It's like, and I've been told that the great Buddhist teachers sometimes laugh at how close we are to enlightenment, that we're just walking around a hair's breadth away. And in my experience, and the way we work with this, is we already are enlightened, and we know that because we have those moments, those fleeting moments where somebody says just the right thing, and it just reduces the suffering in the world. Sometimes we experience this by seeing a beautiful picture, by hearing music. Sometimes it's being with somebody who is in a very painful place, like loss of a loved one. But we all know what it is to be a Buddha. We all know what it is to be completely awake. And what our path, or our spiritual path, is a set of skillful means, or upaya is the Buddhist term, that help us cut through confusion and stabilize and come to know that we can open our hearts, that we can be present, we can be skillful, we can be direct. So, there's one other thing. I think that's enough.
So I'm Alan Jones. I'm the pastor at St. Mark's United Methodist in the Arden Arcade area. So I think I'm going to cheat a little bit, and it's Rabbi Mona who led me astray, because of her talking about language. It just reminds me, I often say, it really is impossible to use language to describe spiritual realities. They just don't meet. And you've got a problem in one direction, but I think I've got a problem in another direction, because Christians think they know what God is. And they know all about Jesus and all of this stuff. So we have words that we say over and over again that I don't trust at all. So beware of words is one of my messages for tonight. By the way, I meant to start by saying thank you to Pastor Georgia and to the community here for inviting us. Some of us are interfaith groupies here. And it always feels good to be together. So, my answer to the first question really, though, is, and forgive inadequate language here, I think the aspect of my belief system, Alan Jones's belief system, that I find most challenging with believers, and this is strange to hear from a preacher, is I find it impossible to really convince people that they are a child of God, a unique and priceless creation of a God of love, that they are beautiful, that they are made in God's image. Do you get the feeling about the language I'm talking about? None of these are just words, but to persuade people that they have the power and the dignity within themselves to be fully who they are, who God has created them to be. I think that is the hardest thing. And as a preacher, I wrestle with that constantly. I often say I don't like the word belief, because I think it gets us all messed up. In United Methodism, if I can just fly my flag for a little while, we're big on prevenient grace, we call it. And the notion is that God is there ahead of us. Prevenient, it's already there. So whether you believe it or not, whether you want it or not, whether you like it or not, you're stuck with the grace of God. Okay, so what do I wish that people not of my faith could better understand about me and us? It's just the sense that the world is in such a mess, and really human values have become so corrupted. We have a corrupt political system. We have people living such selfish, self-absorbed lives. And we have an answer to that. We have the potential to transform the world, not in an arrogant way, but in a loving, beautiful way, in community, sharing with each other with a spiritual base, and it's really cool. And the rest of the world hasn't a clue. Or at least if they do have a clue, they're not showing any interest. So, go figure. Okay, I don't need the other minute, so bye-bye.
Good evening, everyone. Well, the last time I was here, I was seated because my foot was, just had a surgery, and Reverend Georgia has a way to always make me walk in faith. So I'm healed to be here. Grateful to be here with you tonight. And these questions, I'm Reverend Kevin Ross, I'm the Senior Minister of Unity of Sacramento, and we consider this one of our sister communities here in Sacramento. Reverend George and I have just fallen in love with each other from the time that I have arrived here, and Donna and I don't get along that much. Because of it. All right. Question: what aspect of your belief system do you think is the most challenging for your believers to accept, and why? So our foundational principle in unity is the omnipresence of God, which basically states that God is evenly present in all and through all. That there is no absence of God or spirit, or however you term it. There's no absence of spirit anywhere, only presence of God everywhere. And the struggle I find is this idea. It's easier to believe in transcendence, the transcendent God, the God above and beyond. But the struggle I think I find with congregants that I interact with is imminent, that presence can indwell you, that spark of the divine operating in the human soul. I think people struggle with that because of this sense of unworthiness. The sense in which somehow I can't be connected to that which flung the stars and hung the moon and is causal of all that is real. And so that is something that I find that I have to teach extra hard on. That this notion that there is no absence of this presence anywhere, including in each one of us, that we are expressions of this divine presence, however we give language to it, an understanding of it. The second question: what do you wish those in your faith, not in your faith, could better understand about you? Anything. In our tradition, unity is open and affirming. And so people from all backgrounds find their way into our community around the world. This is a space and a place where people are welcome. And so there's this question that comes up, well, what are you then? What are you? We do have a core belief system. There are some ideas. And I guess to say belief system would speak to our theology and philosophy. There's this understanding. We have 5 fundamental principles around which all of our teachings are based. And yet, those who come to our communities are welcome to chart their own spiritual course. We do not feel that we hold the strings and the reins and the permission for what's going to happen if you don't follow this particular spiritual path. We believe that you have arrived at unity because the tradition that you came from brought you to this point, that there's this cumulative unfolding of the soul. And at any point, wherever you are, you're exactly where you are supposed to be. And so I always tell people that when you find yourself in a unity tradition, community, think of it like this. We don't require that you abandon any aspect of what has served you up to this point in your spiritual journey. Our tradition is like every other tradition. It's got a brand name on it, but that brand name does not encase your spiritual journey. It's like trying to put a parenthesis upon eternity. You can't quite do that. And so what we urge you to do is if you have come into our tradition, we ask you to continue to embrace that which has served you up to this moment, this point. And if you find that you have outgrown some aspect of what you believe, it does not serve you any longer, then be open to a new thought, be open to a new idea, because this will help you in the evolution of your soul. At Unity, I like to look at it like this. Unity goes great with everything. It's like cream in your coffee. Cream in your Muslim coffee, cream in your Catholic coffee, cream in your Buddhist coffee, just cream in your Jewish coffee. It just makes any faith tradition just a little bit better. Bless you.
So now what we're going to do is, Christy has an interfaith chant. We're going to sing the chant together. Then we're going to bring all of our guests up here, and we will run microphones for any questions you have of them. So Christy, we're ready for you.
So I grew up singing in choirs. And so my philosophy is wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, there's a choir. So are you open to singing tonight? Awesome. Okay. So what I'd like to do first is acknowledge my sign holders. Yay! So how this works is what I'd like to do is I'd like to just share the definition of the and then the different faith traditions where these words and phrases are coming from. And actually, I can ask you, what does Shanti mean? Peace. And which tradition? Hindu. Yes. And Shalom. Peace. From which tradition? Okay. Om Mani Padme Hum. Well, actually, I have it as Buddhist. And actually, the definition that I had also confirmed with you is that the union of the method and wisdom leads to transformation in the mind of the Buddha. Yes. And La ilaha illallahu is from which tradition? Islam. And it means there is no God but God, yes. And then the last, Gloria in excelsis Deo, or Dea, Christianity. And that means glory to God in the highest. Yes, yeah, I didn't have to explain a thing. Okay, so this is, want to come up a step? Thank you. All right, so I would like to introduce our sign holders. Joyce, Patricia, Stevie, David, and PJ. So thank you. So Joyce, coming down this way. Oh, and what I want to do is actually, I'll teach all the parts. They're pretty straightforward, and I know you guys are going to get it. What I'd like to do, though, is teach the song from the Islam tradition first, because it has the most notes. Okay, and then when I get to that part, I will lead that one. Okay, so it goes. And why don't you all sing it with me? Although you'll be learning another part, but it'll be fine. So it goes like this. La ilaha illallahu, la ilaha illallahu, la ilaha illallahu, la ilaha illallah. So what we're going to do is I'll teach this part, and then you'll just keep singing, and then I'm going to add the next one, and then the next one, and then we'll just put it all together. Okay? Okay, so all of you, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Just one note. Shanti. So keep going. Shanti, 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 Shanti. So right here up the middle. Shanti. Shalom. 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 Very nice. Shalom. 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 Mane Padme Hum. Om 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 Mane Padme Hum. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. In excelsis Deo. Let's end on shalom. 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 Shalom.
Question, and if you can direct it to whomever you'd like to answer, that would be helpful. All right. Who's got their hand up?
If I could direct this to Imam, is that correct? Thank you. If you had access to Mr. Trump after he addressed Congress, where he made the statement that he or the administration or them or whatever are taking strong measures to protect our nation from radical Islamic terrorism. Could you please tell me what you would say to him to help him understand better what Islam is as opposed to Islamic terrorism?
Is it okay if I say this? Okay. Let me just say that I've thought about the idea of having access to Mr. Trump a few times. And of course, the temptation is to give him a piece of your mind. But I think the first thing, honestly, that I would do if he was going to listen to me is ask him to get help. Because I think there's some, I really feel that there's a little bit of trauma there. And that's for our sake, you know. I mean, he's the president. He's got his finger on the button, or many buttons. That being said, if I were to have all the time in the world, I think one thing that I would point out to him, and to others who really enjoy using certain types of terminology to make political arguments and to win political points, is to remind him that the only people that can actually defeat radicalism in the Muslim world are Muslims. And that's the truth. Just as the only people that can defeat radicalism in areas of white supremacy are other folks that those people identify with and who can speak truth to them. And so Muslims need to be empowered to be able to address it. Now, if young Muslims across the world are too afraid to even do the research for fear of being tracked, are too afraid to even engage in those arguments for fear of being labeled, then we have effectively shut down our most important soldiers and our most important weapons in that battle of ideas. And that's what I would say to him.
This question is for Rabbi Alfi. I'm so excited. I had the honor.
I should say the reason I'm laughing is Barbara and I worked together for years, and I can't imagine you have any questions yet.
What I heard from you was such a short time, and you described what the congregants may not believe in or have a lot of different notions. What you didn't say much of, and what I want to hear more about is, you said we're people of action, service, rather than the belief system. So I just wanted you to share with us. I've read, recently what you're up to, but share some social action or Tikkun.
So Judaism focuses on this world and this life. That doesn't mean we don't have ideas and theories and beliefs about the possibilities of what might happen after we pass on. But our theology is that God created this world and gave it to us, and that our job is to care for the world that we live in, and not to do things for the sake of thinking that it's going to earn us a place in heaven, but to do the right thing because it is the right thing to do, period. And so within Judaism, I would say there's many theologies. They're all monotheistic, a centralized concept of God, but there are different approaches and understandings and aspects of God. And the purpose of those belief systems are to help us and to give us strength and courage and hope and inspiration to engage in a righteous way. So halakha, Jewish law, comes from the word laholech, to go. So halakha is the way, it's the path. It's the way you are supposed to walk in the world. And so Judaism focuses more on what you do than what you believe. So the idea is, even as you may struggle with your faith and what you believe, you still have to do stuff. You're still supposed to engage in charitable acts. You still have to treat your neighbor with kindness. And our laws are things like we're not allowed to live in a place where there aren't courts of justice. So it's a lot of the focus on Judaism is about the relationships between one person and another, that what goes on between you and God are between you and God, but the things that are set, that are very set in a very structured way, are the ways that we engage with each other.
I just want to also say that Rabbi Mona's community, the synagogue, is now becoming a sanctuary community. I'm just so much in admiration of that community for everything they do, but this is a big step out for our sisters and brothers who are immigrants and who are frightened this day. Yeah.
Thank you all so much, and I just have to say that Interfaith chant was one of the most powerful things I've experienced in a long time. That was incredible. One of the things that I think about a lot is oneness and what we all have in common, although I will say I loved hearing about the differences tonight. That they were quite exceptional. But I'm wondering if there's one thing that each of you believe that we all have in common, that a sense of oneness.
So I think that we all have a belief in a sense of the idea of being created in the image of God, however you want to describe what God is. I think that I would think, from what I know of the other faiths and from our faith, that there's a general concept that every life is sacred, every life is holy, and that every life needs to be treasured and valued.
I think I can add to that. This notion comes to mind from the Quranic verse where God says that, "O mankind, we have created you in nations and tribes that you may know one another." So in fact, the very differences that define us and make our lines and make us unique, unify us in our pursuit to understand and know one another. I think each and every one of us, regardless of faith tradition, has implanted within our souls, within our hearts, an urge and a curiosity to learn about one another and to experience each other's cultures and foods and lifestyles. That pursuit is thriving in times of peace, and it is lost in times of fear and times of chaos.
What the Buddhists say about this is, if we truly, completely understand the nature of reality, we cannot find anything, anywhere, of any size that is not completely intertwined with everything else. So when we recognize that, and when we feel that, if we cause harm, we cause harm to the unity. And that the basic root of suffering from the Buddhist point of view is that we believe there is something permanent, separate, that we call our ego, which is a very loaded term, a very technical term in Buddhism, that we need to defend. And we start imagining that there are qualities to our ego, and there are qualities to our country, and there are qualities to our clan that are separate and permanent. And from the Buddhist point of view, this will all end when we recognize there is one clan, and that is sentient beings.
See, we're coming up against these words again. One clan, tribe. I think religious communities have sort of behaved like gangs. And, you know, we have our gang colors and we belong. And we prove to the world that we're with us and certainly not with them. And that has to stop. And as one who has spent my whole life, actually my whole adult life, really relating closely with Islam, but also then I taught a class at the seminary with a Buddhist monk, and Alan Jones is a United Methodist. I didn't grow up Methodist. I come from Britain. Nobody in Britain has. But I could easily have spent my life as a Buddhist. I could easily have spent my life as a Jewish worshipper, even though I don't come from that heritage. I certainly could have been a Muslim, and there are some United Methodists who pray 5 times a day because they're following the Muslim way, and I find that really exciting, and I love all of you unity, spiritual awareness, where you draw from all the traditions. It's so cool. So, you know, we're in this together. It's one journey. We're using different language because we're coming from a different gang. And we need to get over it.
Don't you love him? Somewhere along the way I picked up this teaching, and it says, if we all go down deeply enough in ourselves, we come up in everybody else. And in my personal and spiritual journey, I've managed to travel a lot of the world, seeking to do just that, to go down into myself to see if there's any real barriers between me and people who look differently than I do. But what I have found is that In Thailand, a smile communicates the same sentiments. In South Africa, a frown or pain feels the same as it would feel in the United States of America. Family, an importance everywhere I've traveled around the world. Culture and the decoration of culture and the way people hold culture through festivity and through ceremony and through art and through music. I find that to be the same everywhere I go. I don't find any real differences in terms of who we are essentially. I do think that there are language barriers, particularly among the faith traditions. I think our faith traditions are languages and cultures in and of themselves. And they're outsiders and they're insiders. And if we sit long enough with one another, we will find it impossible to see anything really different about who we are fundamentally. And that's what I continue to live and search for. That deep connection, one to the other. I meet no one but me, in many guises and disguises, fundamentally.
Thank you all for being here. This is just wonderful. And I think I just want to continue with what the topic is at this moment, in that we must move forward with what's happening here tonight. And I hope this is a great start. I heard someone say that they are also involved in other interfaith work. I spoke with someone who is a non-believer, non-really spiritual person tonight before I came, and I told him I was coming here. And he said, really? He said, what a wonderful idea. And I agree with him. And I hope that this can build, can it be in each and every one of your churches, your worship communities, where we can all come together on a regular basis and do what we're doing tonight. I think that would be a way that we can grow the love, the understanding, the language barriers, and really move forward. And one other question, and this goes to Rabbi, how can we support you with what's happening right now in the world with what's going on? How can we support you?
It's such a hard, that's been a question I've been asked a lot lately. I think that continuing to build bridges between communities is the most important thing that we can do right now. That I believe that the president and those who admire the work that he's doing are people who enjoy living in a state of fear and anger and angst. And for me, actually, one of the most beautiful things that have come out of everything since November is actually the Muslim and the Jewish community nationally has been really becoming much closer and much more collaborative. And that continuing to get to know each other as individuals, as communities, is really the most important thing. That when you have friends of different faiths, whether they're Jewish or whether they're Muslim, and thankfully the other faiths haven't been attacked lately. It's mainly us right now who are on the hot seat in America. Reach out to them and just say, hey, how are you doing? And what's going on, and check in with them. And depending on how connected they are within their own communities, they may be aware or not aware that every week there's a new wave of threats to our Jewish community centers and to our day schools. And so it affects every person differently. And so doing acts of kindness, reaching out, and showing and expressing words of support matters.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'll piggyback on the previous comment that you should take this show on the road.
So I do want to respond to that.
You're all great. Go ahead, yeah.
So I wanted to respond actually to that part that you had said earlier. So I'm going to make a plug for an organization that some of us are members of, which is Sacramento Area Congregations Together, Sacramento ACT. which is I actually see some of you on the panel more than I see other rabbis in town, because we're like, we really are on the road a lot together. And so I don't know if your congregation is involved, but Sacramento Act has been doing extremely important work in making sure that clergy gets together, that our congregations are doing social justice work in the community. And Sacramento, I think, really is a wonderfully unique, or sadly unique, community, I guess would be a better way of saying it, in that we really do have extremely strong interfaith relations in this community, and a lot of mutual respect and admiration between our communities.
So Gretchen, will you stand up? This is the person who is doing the most with ACT right now for us. She is representing our congregation at many of the events, and this, while it's not an ACT event, this Saturday at 1 o'clock, we are hosting an ACLU telethon to talk about how to become part of the resistance. So if that's of interest to you and you'd like to know how to better use your skills as part of the resistance, come 1:30. 1:30, Gretchen? Yeah, 1:30 here, and we will be glad to get you involved.
Okay, so anyway, oops, there I am. My question is primarily for the rabbi and the imam, but maybe all of you can weigh in at some point. With the current events, how are you counseling your congregants with what is going on, how to respond with your religious fundamental ideas, with how to deal with what's going on and keep us on the right path?
So I don't think Jews have ever met a revolution that they don't like. And so my congregation is very engaged in social justice. And so we're dealing with things by becoming a sanctuary congregation, or by the Salam Center, and our congregation has formed, like, there's a group of us women from both communities that have started a dinner group, and we're trying to figure out what we want to do to expand besides our lovely dinners, but what we can do out in the larger community together to educate people and to create greater awareness. You're going to get a call actually from somebody in our congregation because our high school youth want to do like a poetry slam together, and so the way that our congregation is responding is trying to be more out in the world and more engaged, not just in what we do within our own buildings, but really trying to actively create bridges between communities. And I think that's the way that we're dealing with our anxiety and our fear, is taking our value system and making it a reality and making it tangible in what we do.
An extremely important question. Half the time I find that congregants are counseling me because we're there on a daily basis working, and when your facility is vandalized or when you feel targeted, it can be a little bit nerve-wracking, but the community is made up of people from various backgrounds. Some of them have lived here their entire lives, and others have come from parts of the world where they've seen a lot more suffering, and so they're very strong people, and many of them are already energized to do such connected work, to sit together with other faith communities. But one idea that just kind of popped into my head right now, so I'll just say it out loud, and you guys can yell at me if it was terrible. During the Arab Spring, the revolutions that were going on in the Middle East, their movements for democracy in that part of the world, there was there were some very beautiful symbolic actions, and one that really comes to mind is when Muslims were praying. Some of the Christians and even some of the parts of that world where there are Jewish communities as well would stand up in kind of like solid lines around them. Really, it was a symbol as much as it was an actual line of protection at that point, because they actually needed to prevent certain tanks and things like that from coming and running people over. but there was so much symbolism in that, and then the Muslims would return the favor on a Sunday or things like that. Maybe we need to act in such symbolic ways here to send clear messages. That being said, symbols only go so far, and so we have to make sure that we are actively reaching out to the communities and making sure that they're okay, community members of our own, faith tradition, but also of other faith traditions as well. So when you work with somebody who's of a different faith, but you know that they may also be feeling anxiety at this time, we should reach out and connect. And that's one of the things that we constantly tell people. Oftentimes when you're grieving or when you're fearful and you reach out to someone else who you think may be feeling the same thing, you've alleviated much of the pain within your own heart.
Any more questions?
In the Buddhist tradition, there is a vow called the Bodhisattva vow. And that asks for, is it on? Yeah. In the Buddhist tradition, there is a vow called the Bodhisattva vow. And Bodhisattva means awakened heart-mind. And the vow is basically to work for the benefit of all sentient beings without exception. So, the one question that we should always have on our mind to try to honor this vow is, what will be the most helpful thing to do at any particular moment, in any particular situation? So that's a hard question to answer, but I believe an essential one to ask. And the other thing that I talk with people about is how we hold our minds will determine our effectiveness. If we hold our minds with blame and hate, we will not be as effective. If we hold our minds with compassion, even for the people committing horrific acts, if we can identify with the fact that everyone has a potential, and instead of separating, we actually go towards them. And we try to understand how it happened and what will be the most helpful thing to do. Because blame and making wrong is seldom an effective strategy.
Yeah, just latching on to that notion. In my congregation, I had one member of the congregation here this evening, and she would testify too. We are liberal Democrats, but we have Republicans, we have Trump voters in the congregation. So it's really important to not be demonizing, personalizing. Keep everything as a moral question, a moral issue. What is the most loving way to engage this situation? Most loving way to engage immigrants. I mean, we have biblical teaching for those of us in the Jewish and Christian tradition, but moral, how are we kind to each other, loving to each other? How are we generous with each other? And I would say that for many of us, I should have included in my list of things I could have been. This is a little more difficult. I could have been a Catholic, I could have been a Baptist, I could have been a Pentecostalist, could I? It's really important that we all get out of our gang mentality and see that our very politically and socially conservative friends, and I hope we have some, are people with whom we need to be in conversation about grace and about compassion and about having a tender heart. And wherever that comes from in you, draw on it mightily, because we have apparently half the country living in paranoid fear and a victim mentality that needs to be healed. So you and I have a big job out there to be gracious in the face of bigotry and mean-spiritedness, I'm not hearing a lot of amens out there.
Sitting next to a preacher. Any day can turn into a Sunday, just a moment. Oh, yeah. So, in Unity, our fifth basic teaching is called the law of demonstration. And it fundamentally says that we must not just talk the talk, we must walk the walk. We must demonstrate the truth that we have come to understand. It is an expectation. And so we also seek to be socially relevant and contextually relevant. And that can be difficult at times because through the ages, throughout history, our tradition has had to evolve with the times. And our tradition is more well known for a philosophy of inclusion, a teaching of inclusion, but a practice of inclusion is the challenge, particularly in a context that may involve taking stands. Unity presents itself as the get-along gang. You know, we all get along. I also come from the Kingian tradition. I'm a graduate of Morehouse College, and so I integrate social justice, and I'm introducing social justice as a part of our practice within our Unity communities, connecting it to spiritual social action, connecting it to our values of inclusion and diversity and universal oneness. And so what it looks like for us is we stand shoulder to shoulder with communities of faith who are being vilified and victimized and vandalized. So I can cite many instances, but one Islamic community here in Sacramento was threatened that people were going to come and vandalize their mosque. And so myself and others from Sacramento ACT, as well as Unity of Sacramento, showed up that morning to serve them donuts when they arrived with their, So there was a peaceful way of confronting them. We ended up inviting some of them into the mosque that day and had a beautiful kind of roundtable discussion. It causes us to sometimes stand on the Capitol steps. So many of us have stood together on the Capitol steps multiple times, challenging things that fundamentally contradict our values, and for most of us, our shared values. When those values come under attack, we feel that it's necessary to put some spiritual skin in the game. I also teach my congregation to be an interruption to mediocrity and the reckless hate speech and any behaviors that could diminish the whole. So if it's happening around you and you are co-signing on it with your silence, I call this passive violence. You are allowing it to happen by keeping silent. And so I push my congregation in particular to be an interruption to the drift, as I refer to it. And individually, I think that when we do this, we are most effective. And I think most of the transformation will happen around coffee tables with people that we interact with, or dinner tables, or in our living rooms with people that we interact with on a daily basis, helping to shift attitudes that we have about one another. And so this is how we are engaged at Unity of Sacramento.
1 second. So we're gonna continue taking some questions, but as we do, we're going to tastefully send around a basket. And so feel free to give a gift if you like during that time.
Hi, you sort of answered in part my question, so I'm going to reframe it a little bit. Dr. Cornel West, he reminds us that love or justice is what love looks like in public. And for me, that's a guiding principle in my life. How I translate what I learned here at Center for Spiritual Awareness and how I show up, in the streets, on the steps of the Capitol, whether I'm writing letters, calling my congressperson, or, bugging my city council member about transparency and accountability in policing. And I sometimes, my concern in even kind of the cautious and guarded ways in which you answered some of your questions about social justice, I get concerned sometimes with faith leaders where it feels like you're afraid to disenfranchise or to lose the Trump voters, for instance. You don't want to alienate people. And I really would like to hear what it would take to get 10 or 20, well, and not even that. I would like to see hundreds of thousands of people marching in our streets, our version of Arab Spring, regarding the injustices that are being experienced in this country around social issues, the planet, economic, racial, mass incarceration. And I would just like to know, what does it take to put that caution aside? What do you need to see to just not worry about whether you're offending someone and to really do that call for action?
So I'm going to start with that one. I believe Reverend Jones was talking about this a bit earlier, about starting with the text, or starting with the moral. In my congregation, I always say you have to start with the Jewish. That we don't talk about politics, we talk about Jewish values. We talk about what it is that Judaism calls us to do. After the election, since the election, we've lost 2 families because of the stands that we've taken on becoming a sanctuary congregation. And we have definitely amped up our political activism. And I think I was joking about this with Imam Aziz the other day about the amount of my congregants who said they are ready to sign up for a Muslim registry. And I have to slow them down and say, no, we don't want a Muslim registry. The goal is to make sure it doesn't happen, but they're all in to register if that's the case. And it's because we preach Jewish values all the time. We root everything we do in what our faith tradition commands us to do. We either root it in the text or we root it in our own personal history. So we had a very intense conversation about whether or not to become a sanctuary congregation. And I actually thought it was going to be more controversial than it turned out to be. And it was a unanimous vote by our board. It was the only active voice of dissent that we received was somebody who's not a member, who for some reason is on our email list, and he responded, no, 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 and we're like, we have no idea who this person is. It was really bizarre. And so I think that when you start with your beliefs, if you start with the core of what your tradition is teaching, you also get in a lot less trouble. And I think that too often faith leaders will preach politics as opposed to preaching values.
So if you know, first of all, on the topic of Muslim registries, Muslims come from all different backgrounds, ethnicities, etc. So it's really hard to find them sometimes. And so I was really excited about a Muslim registry. Finally, a list, and I just go through the list, right? I'm just kidding. So, but in regards to taking certain stances, regardless of whether they offend people, you'll have to come to one of our sermons if you really want to be offended. And sometimes it's a good measure of how effective your message was. Is if people come up to you afterwards. People in our own congregation will come up to us afterwards and debate with us on certain topics, and it becomes an opportunity to converse. But in regards to a willingness to lose certain people, or a lack of willingness to lose certain people, I think we are charged with balancing so many things, and part of that balance has to be the willingness to try and change people's hearts. So we do want to change their hearts, and we won't do that at the expense of those who are actually oppressed, and at the expense of those who are actually suffering. So if, for example, we see that there are, we have many, for example, congregants who are in law enforcement, but when we see that there is a significant problem within law enforcement as their attitudes towards particularly black men of color, black men that are young in particular, but also towards other colored communities, and I think we have a duty to take that stance in a way that invites other people to take that stance with us. And so, psychology teaches us that if you engage in a debate about facts, you're less likely to change people's minds. But if you allow them to understand, if you first understand where they're coming from, and understand what their points are, and even acknowledge what ways, even if those are very limited ways, what ways in which they may have a point or they may be accurate in their certain assessments, and then help them to understand how you also have a point. You will often bring people along with you, and in a democracy you need numbers, and so we have to work for numbers. We have to work for hearts.
I think that, again, this is very similar to what I said last time, but the idea that we do have to act to protect people who cannot protect themselves. That's clear. There's no question on that. So the distinction I try to make is action is essential. It's required. Whether that's writing a congressperson or standing on the Capitol steps or whatever it is. And when we encounter people who disagree with us, I think it's our duty to identify in them to be sympathetic with what they're feeling, even if it is anger or rage or separateness. Because if we blame people for how they feel, we will never touch their hearts. We have to acknowledge that people we violently disagree with, and we, as you said, you can argue with facts, it's not going to help. We have to touch their hearts where they are, not where we think they should be. And it brings to mind that great quote from Maya Angelou about when she's given a talk, people will not remember what you said, they'll not remember where you were, but they will remember how you made them feel. And if we connect at a feeling level, if we are courageous enough and skillful enough to connect at a feeling level, that people we violently disagree with are scared, they care about their family, they care about their livelihood, they care about their children. If we can start there, then maybe we have something to talk about instead of just arguing.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I don't think I've ever been aware of not speaking about something that I think is morally important. I believe I am called to tell the truth, and I believe I am called to preach Christian values. All of our values are shalom, salam, peace, rooted, and there's no peace without justice. So, hey, that's all a given. So talk about the issues. And the other thing I want to say is, as well as being a passionate worker for justice, I'm also a pastor. And I really deliberately reach out to those who are trapped in fear or paranoia of whatever kind. If it has a political expression, that doesn't make any difference. I believe the Trump voters and the conservative Republicans in my congregation keep coming to church because at some level they trust the moral values that are being lifted up. And it's not personal. And part of the reason it's not personal is because I work to build relationships with the people who I know disagree with a more liberal political agenda. Now, it's not to say I'm being manipulative. It's just the way it is. If you're a pastor, you're caring for people. You're loving them where they are. And that's what we need to do more of. And we need to not be looking to scare more people away, but rather to draw people in and say, look, you don't have to agree with everything here. We want to have honest, loving conversations where we disagree and where we honor each other in the conversations rather than dishonoring. There is too much abusive talk going on. There is too much dishonoring going on. There's too much dismissing of people. And we've got to find a way to enable people who have felt so alienated to know that they are loved. And there are lots of different kinds of people. And some of them you're not going to like very much. But, you know, in our traditions, that Jesus calls us to go. Go to those. Those are the very folk we're supposed to go to. Okay, I'm getting to preaching again, sorry.
Well, he set it up for the alley-oop, so I'm just gonna, he teed it up there, the ball's right there, so. My thoughts exactly. I don't think it is incumbent upon us to alienate. I think that defeats the love ethic around which faith leaders are called to uplift. Love seeks to draw a circle, and fear draws a line. And so, and at the same time, I do find that it is necessary, particularly from the faith community, since we are the keeper of the values. We have been sent to communities to uphold, to live out, to model, to teach spiritual principles, values. And so when those values are being challenged in society, I do believe it's important that faith leaders step into the moment in recognition and defense of those values. Now, where there are individuals who, let's say a friend or a relative or someone who holds very opposing values that seem to you just have such disdain for, I think the first thing you have to do is check in with the source of your disdain, because around that there's tremendous judgment that will not provide a space for a dialogue. There's a way to actually go about it when you're that heated around an issue in terms of person to person or in a group. Seek to hold the person in your heart as if you were taking that person by the hand. May I borrow? Just as if you were taking their hand to your heart as you're speaking to them. If you don't do it literally, what if you could hold them as you talk to them? So it's like, Grandma, did you realize that comment you made hurt a lot of people in the room? And I know that you don't mean to be that way because you're just as sweet as apple pie, but that comment really hurt a lot of people. Were you aware of that? So there's a way of being with people that can hold them right there with you. I don't want to let you go. You're mine. You got it? And I'm hard on the issue. I'm loving on the person. Hard on the issue. Kind of lean in, hard on the issue. Loving on the person. Because I want the person to have the impact of having been loved through a very difficult issue. The risk involved with taking stands from faith leaders' perspective, this week in particular, I got 2 letters in the mail. We all receive letters in the mail and of late emails. 2 letters in the mail. One, and it was because of an act that many of us participated in around this issue on immigration. Many of us in Sacramento ACT took a stand and held a press conference around some of the most recent, I called it, what did I call it? Executive disorders. You know, I call it an executive disorder that would prevent people from being a part of our democracy, our society. And so a couple of congregants were aware of this and saw us on television and all of that. And one wrote in and said, I don't think Unity should be involved in this type of thing. Now, I'm standing there with most every faith leader, you know, in Sacramento, because that's just how we're a wolf pack. We just show up. We really do. And so she wrote saying, I don't think that Unity of Sacramento should be involved in this type of action. This seems to be, you know, polarizing an issue, et cetera, et cetera. So I will have an opportunity to write her back and sit down and share with her where that comes from. The second card, I opened it, it was a card. Reverend Ross, thank you so very much for being there to represent our community, and here's a check to support the work that you're doing. Isn't that interesting? So we recognize that not everybody will align at first or at all with that, but it has been the faith communities of faith that have helped to bring about, particularly in my community, bring about the social conscience, to awaken the social conscience of a society. It comes out of us. And so where will you stand, you know, when the history is written? I would hate to be one of the individuals who, as the civil rights era was, you know, one of the faith leaders who, when the civil rights era was unfolding, said, no, I might lose a couple people in my congregation if I, you know, speak out against racism. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. So, you know, if you want to make an omelet, you got to crack a few eggs, and, you know, it'll happen. But I think ultimately it's for the greater good. That is all.
Well, that brings our panel presentation to a close. We have one closing song. We'd like to invite you to stay and sing, but could we have another round of applause for these wonderful faith leaders? We're going to ask you to take your seats back down there, because we're going to put the words up on the, you can leave your chairs here. And I also want to, I'm grateful for them for coming, because, you know, we're all working hard, and they took time out from their schedules and their families to be here tonight. But I'm also very grateful to each and every one of you who took time out of here and be a part of this movement that says, you know what, we're all in this together. Yeah, right. So, Christy?
Many of you will be familiar with this song.
Streets of green, red roses.
Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Give yourselves a big round.
We have cookies and coffee and tea in Brooks Hall. If you'd like to stay and have some arm's length, please do.